Sacrifice. This is the word that every supernatural entity becomes obsessed with anytime they get close to Guts or Casca, and it's all thanks to the Bluetooth symbol-shaped brand of sacrifice seared directly into their flesh and soul. Central to the series' themes of causality and existential struggle, the brand condemns its victims to relentless persecution by the forces of evil, be they intangible or tangible, and it serves as a physical manifestation of the God Hand's influence over human destiny. In this video, we'll explore its significance through parallels to real-world mythology and folklore, identifying symbols and rituals that share thematic and functional similarities while breaking down the true meaning of the brand. It's going to be awesome, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The brand of sacrifice and how it works in Berserk. To understand how the brand of sacrifice works, we need to understand what it is, so let's start with that first. The brand of sacrifice is a cursed mark that symbolizes a brutal, non-consensual pact between mortals and supernatural forces, binding its bearers to a grim fate. We say non-consensual because the person afflicted with the brand has no choice in this matter. It's burned into the flesh of individuals unlucky enough to be close to a bearer of a behelit. When a behelit is activated, be it a regular behelit or the Crimson Behelit, it triggers a ritual where a person sacrifices their loved ones to the God Hand in exchange for becoming an apostle, and once in every 216 years, a God Hand. Those branded are fated to be hunted by apostles and tormented by evil spirits until death, because every ounce of torment in their hearts and drop of blood in their bodies has been promised to the abyss. Usually, the bearer of a brand doesn't get to see the light of day once they've been marked, because what good is a sacrificial offering if it cannot be presented during the ritual? Based on the Slug Count's apostle ceremony, we think it's safe to say that most brand bearers get devoured by those who sacrifice them, seeing as all apostle bodies are linked to the abyss. Guts and Casca are the only exceptions that we know of, and they survived because they had the magical protection of Skull Knight on their side. But the brand still remains on their bodies, a constant reminder of their precarious existence and the losses they have endured. Its design, a jagged rune-like symbol that Mura based off the Bluetooth sign, embodies themes of irrevocable doom and cosmic manipulation. In fact, the ritual that leads to a person being branded is called the Invocation of Doom, and the sacrifice itself is a major comment on Berserk's exploration of free will versus predestination. All those who bear the brand, whether they're dead or alive, have it because causality said so. If the owner of a behelit is decided before it hits the physical world, then surely their sacrifices must be earmarked as well. No behelit owner can resist the power it promises, so the death of their loved ones is all but inevitable. And yet, survival can often be worse than death if you possess the brand of sacrifice. Once you receive it, you become an interstitial entity. What that means is that you might exist in the physical world, but you'll be able to interact with several elements from the astral world as well. And not the fairies and elves of the astral world, no. The dead souls that didn't die just deaths, the monsters and apostles that feast on hot human flesh, these are the beings you'll be interacting with on an hourly basis, because the brand attracts them like a magnet. Sleeping is out of the question unless sunburn isn't a concern for you, because you can never again rest in the dark. Guts had become fairly well adjusted as a person before he got the brand. Once he did, he reverted to his feral childhood self, not entirely by choice, but by necessity as well. You try lugging around a gigantic sword with a full set of armor after 4 days of constant battle and sleepless nights. No wonder he feels like a taut rubber band when we first meet him, because that's how thin the brand can stretch one's sanity. Heck, apostles are utterly confused by his survival once they spot the brand, because by every metric they're aware of, he shouldn't even be alive. Now that we've established what the brand is and what it does, let's take a look at a few examples from real-world mythology and folklore that Miura might have drawn inspiration from. Brand of Sacrifice. Real-world mythological and folklore parallels. The primary design and purpose influence for the brand seems to come from Norse ruins and Odin's infamous sacrifice. In Norse mythology, Odin hung himself from the branches of the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days, pierced by his own spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. Once he returned from quote-unquote death, these runes became symbols of divine power and cosmic order, used for magic, divination, and communication with the gods. Like the brand, runes were both a mark of sacrifice and a conduit for supernatural influence. Odin's self-sacrifice mirrors the eclipse's transactional nature, where pain and loss grant access to higher power. The brand's runic aesthetic may draw indirect inspiration from this tradition, though it's not directly based on any specific rune. At best, we can say it functionally resembles the Bjorkatorp cursed runestone, a 6th century Swedish runestone that bears an inscription warning that anyone who damages it will be cursed to insidious death. That last description is a perfect match for the fate of those who receive the brand of sacrifice, so it could be that Miura read about this runestone and created his sacrificial symbol, but you might have noticed that Odin used himself as the sacrifice for gaining the power of the runes, not a family member or a lover. In Berserk, the brand of sacrifice is bestowed upon the loved ones of those seeking power, not themselves, which brings us to the second likely inspiration behind it. Human sacrifice was a common occurrence in Aztec culture. The Aztecs believed human sacrifice was necessary to appease gods like the sun god, Huitzilopochtli, and the rain god, Tlaloc, ensuring the sun's daily rise and agricultural fertility. Victims, often warriors or slaves, were marked as offerings through ritual paint or adornments before their hearts were ceremonially extracted. This practice reflects the brand's function, designating individuals for sacrifice to maintain cosmic balance. Just as the brand feeds the abyss where the god of Berserk resides, Aztec sacrifices fed the gods, sustaining the universe. In the Rig Veda, the primordial being Purusha is dismembered by the gods to create the universe. His eyes become the sun, his breath the wind, and his mind the moon. This act establishes sacrifice as a foundational cosmic principle and seems to have inspired the creation of the God Hand itself. The God Hand were established when a certain sage was tortured into oblivion and ended up activating the Crimson Behelit. That sage became Void, the archangel of the Inhumans, and the only person who can instigate the invocation of doom. The first sacrifice to the God Hand was that of Supreme King Geiseric's capital city, which laid the precedent for all future Inhumans. To put it simply, the brand of sacrifice ties its bearers to Berserk's metaphysical framework, where human suffering fuels the God Hand's machinations. Both myths frame sacrifice as a necessary, if brutal, force of creation and order. Apostles and evil are a natural part of Berserk's cosmic cycle, but what makes them unnatural is the spamming of ritual sacrifices since magic began dying out in the world. There are far more apostles and evil creatures in proportion to the good ones, which spells out Miura's thoughts on the morality of sacrifice. By itself, sacrifice is an arcane practice that we're glad to be rid of. It makes no sense to take a life to appease the creator of all things, does it? By making his sacrifices victims of evil, Miura is likely commenting on the evil nature of sacrificial rites, which necessitate losing someone real to gain something abstract, be it strength or divine providence. Perhaps the greatest influence on the brand of sacrifice's creation comes from the Bible, because it incorporates one biblical myth while subverting another. In Genesis, God tests Abraham by commanding him to sacrifice his son Isaac. At the last moment, a ram is substituted for Isaac, symbolizing divine mercy and the concept of substitutionary sacrifice. The brand is the exact opposite of this test because its victims are irrevocably marked, and the God Hand isn't checking its apostles for loyalty to them. Loyalty becomes ingrained within an apostle on a molecular level once they accept the God Hand's deal, so while both narratives explore themes of faith, obedience, and the tension between mortal agency and divine will, only one of them truly reflects the concept of divine mercy. The ram's horns become a symbol of devotion in Abrahamic tradition, paralleling the brand's role as a visible mark of having covenant with higher powers. Speaking of marks, also in Genesis, Cain is marked by God after murdering his brother Abel, ensuring no one would kill him. The exact nature of the mark is debated because some interpret it as a physical symbol like a Hebrew letter or a divine aura that can only be sensed, but it universally signifies exile and divine judgment. Unlike the brand of sacrifice, it serves as protection, for with the mark's influence, Cain effectively becomes immortal. Yet it forever brands Cain as a murderer, and we know that immortality is less a gift and more a curse. The God Hand brands their sacrificial offerings to create a link between them and the abyss, and while this doesn't do anything for the sacrifices themselves, it makes the person sacrificing them functionally immortal. Apostles usually can't be killed unless you behead them and destroy their brains, because they'll just regrow or reattach their severed limbs. In this way, immortality becomes a gift, but because it comes from the God Hand, it's a tainted gift and just as emblematic of murderers as the mark of Cain once was. Once applied, the brand functions a lot like the curse of the House of Atreus, in that it promotes a cycle of cannibalism, murder, and betrayal, much like the events that plagued the Atreus dynasty after Tantalus's crimes. Tantalus was cursed by the gods to starve eternally while being tempted with the promise of fruit. Every time Tantalus reaches out to grab fruit from a tree, the tree pulls its branches away because he made the abominable decision to feed the gods his own son as a meal. The house of Atreus descended into depravity, and the things they were said to have done as a result of Tantalus's curse are daily thoroughfare for the apostles. The curse of the house of Atreus is commentary on generational trauma and the lengths of debasement humans are willing to stoop down to, much like the brand's intergenerational impact on Guts, Casca, and their demon child. The demon child's birth itself is a lot like the curse of Cassandra, who was a woman plagued by the power of true prophecy. In Greek mythology, Apollo cursed Cassandra with the gift of true prophecy after she rejected him, ensuring no one would believe her warnings. The reason behind this varies. Some versions claim that Cassandra promised Apollo her hand in marriage in exchange for the power of prophecy, and others say that she was already blessed with foresight because a few snakes whispered in or licked her ears. But all versions agree that because Cassandra denied Apollo her maidenhead, he cursed her with disbelief. Cassandra's prophetic powers were so refined that she could accurately predict the future, but Apollo couldn't rescind this gift as a curse. So instead, he made things play out in such a way that no one would ever believe Cassandra, and this ends up creating the basis for the fall of Troy. During the Trojan War, Cassandra makes several accurate predictions about the outcome, like the Greeks using the wooden horse as a ploy and the death of King Agamemnon. But because she was never believed, she was locked up in a tower like a madwoman, and Troy ended up falling, just like she predicted it would. The most infamous part of Cassandra's story is the fact that she was sexually assaulted in a temple dedicated to Athena by a Greek warrior called Ajax the Lesser. Because he desecrated Athena's temple, the goddess pledged to destroy him, but for many years, Ajax escaped her divine judgment. On one occasion, he hid at a divine altar, knowing that no true worshipper would demolish the altar just to get to him. But in the end, Athena had her revenge when she struck Ajax's ship with a thunderbolt. He managed to survive this by clinging to a rock, and initially, it was believed that Poseidon himself helped Ajax. But when Ajax made his hubris known to the god of the seas, Poseidon broke the stone upon which Ajax had taken refuge into two, and the sea claimed his body. Ajax's body washed up on the shores of Mykonos, but instead of being given the treatment that a condemned man must receive, he was buried as a hero. Cassandra's curse weaponizes truth itself, reflecting the brand's role in trapping its bearers in a predetermined fate. And, in a way, it also tells the story of Casca. Casca is one of the only characters in the entire series to be named after a real-life figure from history. Publius Casca was one of the leading conspirators in the assassination of Julius Caesar. In fact, he was the first one to stab Caesar, and the dictator, despairing of his childhood friend's betrayal, called him a villain. The Casca from Berserk is an amalgamation of Cassandra and Casca, with the latter's tale once again being subverted. Instead of being the traitor, Casca is betrayed by Griffith, the man she looked up to as her god. And instead of having prophetic visions, Casca was reduced to a mindless state where many people who interacted with her thought her mad. Even Cassandra's prophetic powers get a place in Berserk because in the current timeline, most of humanity has forgotten its magical roots. Only people like Guts and Casca know the truth of the world, but if they try to explain it to someone, they're deemed insane. The most glaring example of this has to be Guts' first conversation with Farnace, where he mocks her for being a woman of faith and not believing that evil monsters can be just as real as her god. So, as you can see, Miura drew inspiration for the mythology of the brand of the sacrifice from several sources. Many of the sources we've mentioned here might not have been what he looked at specifically, but the similarities can't be ignored. Heck, one can even say that Guts is actually supposed to be Casca because his story is eerily similar to that of Barry Sadler's eternal mercenary Casca. In Sadler's work, Casca was the man who stabbed Jesus with the spear of Longinus to give him relief, but when he did so, Jesus condemned him to walk the earth until his second coming. He said, "Soldier, you are content with what you are, then that you shall remain until we meet again. As I go now to my Father, you must one day come to me." This piece of dialogue matches Guts' mentality exactly, so we can assume that Barry Sadler's novels had a great impact on Miura as well, just like Star Wars and several other Western works did. But what is the point of telling you all this now? How does it relate to the importance of the brand of sacrifice? Well, that's what we'll be getting to next. Brand of Sacrifice: Importance and Ultimate Role in Berserk. Sacrificial symbols and marks often illustrate humanity's enduring fascination with curses as tools of justice, control, and cosmic balance. They usually blur the line between divine order and mortal suffering, revealing universal fears about fate, power and using the body as a canvas for punishment. From Aztec rituals to Purusha's dismemberment, sacrifice is believed to create and maintain order in the universe. Runes, ritual markings, and substitutionary animals like Isaac's ram serve as physical tokens of divine agreements, and sacrifice in mythology and folklore often blurs the line between necessity and cruelty. If you're a member of the God Hand, then you believe that the brand of sacrifice does all these things because it sustains the God Hand's influence over mankind in more ways than one. The divine order that a branded individual submits to is one of pure malice, and their mortal suffering becomes food for the children of evil. Sacrifice in Berserk creates order, yes, but it's not the kind of balancing primordial order that most other sacrifices signify. The only order it creates and sustains is the one controlled by the God Hand, because it's implied several times that they're responsible for arcana disappearing from the world. While most sacrificial tales blur the lines between necessity and cruelty, the brand is unique in that it is seen as a necessary cruelty for one to transcend their mortal coil. The brand of sacrifice distills these archetypes into a singular haunting emblem, reflecting humanity's enduring fascination with the price of power and the fragility of free will. There is nothing morally ambiguous about it. The bearer of this brand will eventually become nourishment for those reborn from the abyss. When a person is sacrificed in such fashion, it's said that the heart of the one making the sacrifice is frozen in place, withheld from human emotions, and that's true. All apostles live in a completely id-based reality. They indulge their senses to the maximum and commit all kinds of horrific acts, including cannibalism, because technically they were once human, and we're told multiple times throughout Berserk that once someone is branded, that's it for them. There's no way to get rid of it, no escaping the creatures that pursue the branded, because A, most people don't even know what it is, and B, those who do know fear it greatly. When we meet the young witch Shirke, we're introduced to the current beliefs prevalent in the magical community with regards to the brand. Shirke thinks Guts either has a death wish or is extremely stupid for wanting to resist things like gods and angels, but as she travels alongside him, she comes to see that her previous thinking was heavily flawed. That's because it discounted something extremely important to the concept of fate in Berserk, the role of the personal decisions that the chosen ones make. Now, usually, people cannot resist their fate in Mura's work, because one way or another, it comes true. But curiously enough, the only person who has been shown to be able to provably alter the course of causality is one who's supposed to be at its mercy. Guts was introduced to us during his time as the Black Swordsman, and he did something most humans wouldn't even think of doing. He turned his sacrificial mark into a tracking device, because he learned that the pain it caused increased with proximity to evil. He fought beyond tooth and nail during the eclipse to keep himself and his friends alive, and though he's in an extremely precarious situation right now, all of his actions embody the opposite ideal of what the brand's presence in the story espouses, that no matter what destiny has been assigned to you, you can choose not to act on it through your own free will. Every member of the Band of the Falcon was supposed to die during the eclipse, but Guts survived because in the abyss of despair, he was the only one enraged enough to keep fighting, even with a broken sword in hand. Before the incarnation ceremony, when Skull Knight informs Guts what's about to happen, the Black Swordsman basically tells him that he makes his own luck, and that comes true thanks to his son. Right before placing him in the position of the divine womb, the egg of the perfect world, Griffith's intended incarnation vessel, swallows the dying body of Guts and Casca's demon child. This wasn't part of the plan at all, because the introduction of a hybrid like the child can present permanent complications. But because the egg identified with the dying child, it exercised free will and gave him a front row seat to the birth of the new world. This ended up creating Griffith's only known weakness, which is when he transforms into the Moonlight Boy on nights with a full moon. Skull Knight believes that causality is a circle, and what happened to him is destined to happen to Guts as well. But Flora corrects him and says that fate is a spiral, and its application ultimately depends on the person it's destined for. God bestows upon humans the gift of encountering other people and interacting with them, but ultimately, to succumb to one's fate is one's own choice. If Guts wanted to, he could have rolled over and let the dead spirits claim him that first night he woke up after the eclipse. Instead, he has chosen to stand and fight, and though it makes his life miserable, it proves day after day that man can contend with destiny itself and come out on top. And perhaps the biggest confirmation of this theory of ours comes from Flora, who says something that might have escaped your notice if you didn't read the fine print when she was treating Guts and Casca. Flora says that her power has diminished to the point that she can only create a talisman that dampens the brand for 3 days, but it's what she leaves unsaid that gives you a better picture of her powers. What did she mean by her waning power being the reason she can only dampen the brand's effects? If Flora had been in her prime, could she have removed it entirely? Well, that seems to be the implication, and it would make a ton of sense. Flora is one of the oldest and most powerful mages in the entire series. When she dies, her soul is converted into a daimon because it's so strong and important to the world. If Flora had been in her prime and was capable of removing the brand entirely, then that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. We like the one where, at the end of Berserk, Guts and Casca can escape their grisly fate and live together happily ever after, because believe it or not, that's what Miura intended to be this story's ending. During one of the few interviews he did in life, Miura told interviewers that he wasn't going to end Berserk on a bummer because that's not the kind of story he enjoys. Miura's greatest personal inspiration is Star Wars. He was very much setting up Guts to have a hero's journey and a hero's ending. So now the question becomes, how does the brand play into that? Well, it's quite simple. Its removal from his and Casca's flesh is what will prove that free will reigns supreme over predetermined fate. There is evidence that this can be done beyond Flora's words. For the 2 years that Guts was off doing Black Swordsman stuff, Casca remained safe in a cave that was the former haunt of a group of elves. Elves are strongly related to positive magic in Berserk, and wherever they dwell or dwelt, the brand's negative magic becomes useless. This means that a sufficiently powerful mage, who is aligned with the ideals of goodness and possesses deep knowledge about the power of evil, should be able to remove that thing from Guts and Casca's bodies and souls. And that seems to be the true importance of the brand of sacrifice in Berserk. From day one, every apostle Guts has ever met has been shocked at the fact that he's still alive because no one survives the invocation of doom. Those who meet him and are unaware of the astral world's machinations still think he's some sort of pagan barbarian because of the brand. But his actions reveal the truth of his heart, not his words, and they further reinforce his man with a foot in both worlds status. The brand of sacrifice's true meaning, at least the one that's been hidden from us, is that it is the ultimate test of a person's free will. It's not like the bearers of the brand don't get a breakdown of its inner workings when they're branded with it. They do. And for most people, just the knowledge that they're going to be haunted until the end of their days would be enough to finish the job that the apostles couldn't. Everything about the God Hand, the Behelits, the brandings, causality itself, is about taking agency away from humanity. In the deleted chapter 83, when Griffith asks the god of Berserk why it exists and does what it does, the god responds that it doesn't do anything that humanity hasn't wished for. Causality exists because humans desire reasons to make their suffering mean something. Good and bad, honor and disrespect, love and hate, they're two sides of the same coin, except the god of Berserk is trying to black out the good, honor, and love with its sinful influence. The current timeline of the story is one filled with despair, because even the secondary and tertiary characters' lives are dictated by misery. The world of Berserk is awful when you think about it. War is constant, women are unsafe everywhere, and when a man tries to rise to the occasion and do true justice, he's shut down by 1,000 others who just wish to get by on a baseline level of existence. This isn't because the world itself is that bad, rather it's because the influence of evil has increased exponentially in the last millennium. The only way to ensure that good doesn't exist anymore is to convince people that it never did. And that's exactly what the God Hand accomplishes through its manipulation of the Holy See. But on the flip side of things, Guts is still breathing the air of the physical world, and despite being destined for death, he's still alive. Heck, Casca is still alive, and she was practically defenseless for nearly 3 years. This, to us, can mean only one thing. No matter what fate has been decided for us by those around us, we can change it if we're truly determined to do so. That's why the brand of sacrifice serves as the perfect twisted allegory for free will, because despite knowing where he's headed, Guts is determined to avoid it all the same. Not because he's afraid of death or hell, but because he feels like he's got a choice in the matter, which is something we forget quite often. Human sacrifice has gone down drastically in the real world as the centuries have civilized us, because we know that taking another living being's life gives only one kind of power to the one who does it, and that's psychological. Supremacist ideals are closely linked to sacrificial practices, and by going against the grain, Guts is a fighter for equality and human liberty. Though Berserk is a long way from being over, we can at the very least say with full confidence that this is the reason Miura introduced the brand of sacrifice, and why it's important in the world of Berserk. It's not that it creates a link between a person and the abyss of evil that cannot be escaped through conventional means. It's that, despite being linked to the abyss, the primary bearer of the brand has never fully succumbed to evil forces whether they're physical or mental. Ultimately, the brand is an amalgamation of all human expectations from such signs and symbols, and an exposure of human hypocrisy in the name of salvation. Salvation cannot come from an external source, because then it's being thrust upon you. True salvation only comes from within, and we suspect that that is a truth that many denizens of the Berserk verse will learn to their horror, seeing as they've given over every aspect of their daily lives to the worship of a man who is posing as God on Earth. Once the false narrative around Griffith melts in front of his subjects' eyes, the true worth of sacrifice will be revealed in Berserk, and it won't be powering the abyss at that point. We can tell you that much with utmost certainty. Marvelous verdict! So we might have gone a little overboard with our explanation of such a simple symbol, but we know that's why you guys come to this channel. So we hope you liked our interpretation of the importance of the brand, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the same. Let us know in the comments section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Berserk content. We'll see you guys in the next one, so until then, stay safe and remember, keep on struggling, strugglers.